Hi, Andy XL back with another NFXL podcast pre the 2026 NFL draft, which is just 9 days away now. Counting down the days with keen anticipation. Right. Yesterday, I looked at some possible mid round steals, some candidates to look out for as potential value that could turn into really good players in the NFL. Um, in this piece, I'm going to look at potential sliders. So, like I said, having looked at potential mid-round or later value options, here I'll look at draft candidates who could slide come draft time from their pre-draft big board rankings, stroke expectancy of when they might go. Now, this is more tricky to predict than those value options in my previous piece, as it only takes one team loving those guys would make me right. But here, a team liking one of those candidates I pick out makes me look bad. And this is not me saying they will necessarily be bust in the NFL, just that it is possible that they may have to wait longer to get selected than they and everybody else might expect. So here are my possible draft sliders, starting with Francis Mauigoa, the offensive tackle out of Miami. Firstly, Mauigoa is slated to be a top six pick in this NFL draft, but Will Campbell was taken third overall last year, and he got exposed horribly in the postseason. So will that make teams shy of taking an offensive tackle early in this draft? Has to be a question for me. The teams up early in this draft who seem to have a pressing need at offensive tackle are Arizona at pick 3 and Tennessee at pick 4. If those two pass on Marigoa, then Kansas City at pick 9 might be the last opportunity for an offensive tackle to go in the top half of round 1. Throw in a minor issue with his back that could put doubt in those three teams, plus the chance that Arizona and Tennessee go edge and get the best of the strongest positional class in this draft. Tennessee may also go running back. Kansas City have a pressing need at cornerback and wide receiver that would be other options for them too. So if Marigoa slips past those three teams, he would possibly slide into the bottom half of round 1, where Monroe Freeling, Caden Proctor, and Blake Miller plus possibly Spencer Fano if a team sees him as a tackle rather than a guard, become alternative options to Mauigoa. I do not see a drastic slide for him here, but it is conceivable that he was still on the board when the likes of San Fran, Houston, and KC with their second round one pick come to take their chance at picks 26, 27, and 28. So he could slide towards the back end of round 1, is what I'm saying with Mauigoa, rather than be a top 10. The second one I've got here, I'm just going to take a quick drink before I go on to it, is the wide receiver Jordan Tyson out of Arizona State. Whilst Tyson is undoubtedly talented, his durability is in question, not helped by a hamstring injury that saw him miss the opportunity to show teams what they could be missing at the combine. He is slated to have a pro day for NFL teams in the next few days. That will be huge for Tyson in terms of his draft prospects. If scouts were to come away from that workout unconvinced, Tyson could slide in the wide receiver queue of this draft class. On on the top six in this class, three, Mackay Lemon, Omar Cooper, and KC Concepcion, may be more slot receivers than outside receivers like Tyson will be. So Carnell Tate and Denzel Boston may be the ones Tyson is competing with for first round selection. We are likely to see only one of those outside receivers go in the first dozen picks. Right now, Tate seems to have the nod in getting that early pick, although Cleveland, Washington, New Orleans, and Kansas City could all be in need of a wide receiver early in this draft and have picks 6 to 9. So it is possible two could go early if Tyson shows up well on his pro day. Even if Tyson is passed on by those four teams, we still then have Miami, Baltimore, the Jets, and Carolina offering mid-round opportunities. So it would take a major concern regarding Tyson to prevent him going in the first 20 picks of this draft. But should a combination of those teams choosing other preferences and the durability concerns regarding Tyson causing all 8 of those teams mentioned to pass on him, that would give teams like the Chargers, Cleveland, Buffalo, Kansas City again at the back end, and Miami and New England all at the back end of round 1 to consider why those teams passed on Tyson. And that could lead them to look at Denzel Boston being a safer option. Um, Or would they then consider that Tyson is value at the end of round one? Given I've mentioned 8 teams in the top 20 and another 6 in the back end of round one who could all consider Tyson as possible first round selection, it is highly unlikely he slips out of round one. But maybe like Mauagoa, he could fall into that latter part of the opening round if he does not shine on his pro day. Third up, quarterback Ty Simpson, Alabama. I've made it clear in previous pieces I'm not convinced of Simpson's abilities at this stage of his development, and I also have the sage words of Drew Brees in my mind when he pointed out in the middle of last season that the young quarterbacks that are doing well in the NFL are the ones that enter the league with 25 plus or preferably 30 plus college starts behind them. Simpson is a one-season starter with just 13 starts in the locker, so does not fit the type identified by Brees. It also seems to be accepted that Simpson would be drafted to redshirt this season and then potentially move into a starting role in 2027. Now, my question here is how does that make sense when there is an uber talented quarterback class set to come out in the 2027 draft, including both Dante Moore and Trinidad Chambliss for starters, who may well have gone before Simpson in this draft, had they not chosen to get more experience by staying in college. Add to that the likes of Julian Sayin, Arch Manning, and possibly others who could emerge in the 2026 college season, and they may all represent better options than the red-shirted Simpson for 2027 and beyond. If I were an NFL team looking for a long-term succession plan, I would prefer to take an NFL-ready quarterback in next year's draft than redshirt Simpson from this draft. If teams like the Rams, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh think the same way, Simpson could slide even into round two and even into round three, maybe even round four, and maybe competing with Garrett Nussmeier and Carson Beck to be the QB2 in this class. But as I said at the beginning, it would only take one team to see that differently to make me look silly regarding Simpson and his draft prospects. I'm not saying he will slide, I'm just saying he could slide. On to the next one. It's a defensive tackle, and it's Caleb Banks out of Florida, I should say. Atlanta, Carolina, Minnesota, New England, and the Giants look to be the 5 teams with the most urgent need at defensive tackle, and with no defensive tackle slated to go in the top half of round one. That means the picks available to the first defensive tackles off the board could be Minnesota at 18, Carolina at 19, and New England at 31. But it is possible all 3 of their teams may choose other positions. So I can see possibly at most one defensive tackle going in round one. Peter Woods, Caden McDonald, and Lee Hunter may represent safer options than Banks at the end of round one or start of round two. Now, Banks is probably the most talented defensive tackle in this class, but persistent and recurring foot injuries raise a huge question mark over his durability and availability. In round two, the Giants have picked 37. Then the defensive tackles may have to wait until picks 48, 49, and 51 that belong to Atlanta, Minnesota, and Carolina to get a selection. It would seem at most 3 get taken by pick 51, which could leave Banks as the 4th man, still waiting with the next pick of the defensive tackle needy teams being New England at 63. If any of Woods, McDonald, or Hunter were on the board at this point, then they would be favourites to get this pick. And Christian Miller would be another defensive tackle to come into the equation in the mid to latter part of round two. After that pick, we get to the middle of round 3 for the next possible defensive tackle landing spots. So if Banks becomes the defensive tackle 5 in this class behind Woods, McDonald, Hunter, and Miller due to those injury worries, that may be the best he can hope for. But his upside is so great. I see somebody taking him before we get to round 3 for sure. He's that good a player. Somebody's going to take a risk on him and say, forget the injury. He's so good. We're going to take him. Right, next guy out. Romello Height, edge out of Texas Tech. This is a highly talented and deep class at the edge positions, but eventually demand will run dry, and Height has been one who has been slipping down the positional rankings recently. Right now, I have him as my 13th ranked edge guy with just over a week to go to the draft, where he was a top 6 edge guy a month or 2 ago. With 12 to 16 teams possibly taking edge guys on day 1 or 2, Height is vulnerable to a further drop down the positional ranking, not only seeing him drop out around 2, but out of day 2 completely. Moving on, a couple more age guys that could suffer the same fate as Height are Joshua Josephs um, from Tennessee and LT Overton of Alabama. They've similarly been sliding down the positional rankings, and as with Height, they could suffer the same fate if demand dries up by the time we get past the first dozen, say, edge candidates that have been taken. So they could see a slide as well. Then we get two more again from the same position and two more quarterbacks. Drew Allar out of Penn State and Cade Klubnik out of Clemson. Referring back to my comments re Ty Simpson, why would a team take Allar or Klubnik in the mid rounds when they can wait till next year for a better option? That's the question I'm posing myself here. Both these guys were firm day 1 or day 2 contenders before the last college season, but the general perception of them has changed since then from being possible NFL starters to possible NFL backups. At most, post free agency, there are 4 or 5 teams looking for that backup type of quarterback. And that type of quarterback normally goes in round 4 at the earliest. In this draft, that could see these guys slide into round 5, 6, or even 7, especially as the likes of Taylor Green and Cole Payton look to offer more on the reward side of the risk reward equation. The risk lessens later in the draft, as what have you got to lose by taking a quarterback late in the draft? But as Brock Purdy has shown, the upside is still there. But that may be the fault that befalls Allar and Klubnik in this draft. I can see him falling into 5, 6, and round 5, 6, and 7. And the final one on my slide is Isaiah Weld, the offensive tackle out of Oregon. In truth, Weld has been on a steady decline in terms of his draft stock since he tore his ACL in the final game of the college season in January. That injury and his lack of experience are two question marks that make him a risky option in this draft. But the long-term developmental upside remains, assuming he recovers well from that nasty injury. So as we get further into day 3, Weld may actually present a value option, but he's fallen from where he was as a possible round 2, round 3 guy. Indeed, a team that may take that view earlier in the draft about him being a value option, but that injury on top of the experience question mark is likely to hurt his draft prospects badly. So, like I say, whereas he was a possible late first rounder and top 5 offensive tackle in this draft, he has tumbled to being a mid round possible and outside the top 15 offensive tackles on my big board right now. So that's some people who might slide come draft time. Like I say, I don't see it as really a knock on most of them. I've had a bit of a dig at Ty Simpson again, but most of it, some of it is like situational, positional, demand, etc. So that's how I see those. My next piece, let's just have a look what I'm coming up with next. Got to remind myself here, I've been doing that many pieces recently. Yeah, right. Tomorrow I'm going to have a look at how the positional classes stack up in terms of best to worst. And here I go. I'm going to tell you now, the worst positional class in this draft is the quarterback position. And just above that is running back. But I'll tell you the rest of it tomorrow. So stay tuned for that one. See you soon.